Welcome back to our channel where history comes alive with fascinating tales from the forgotten corners of time. Today we journey back over 1,000 years to uncover the mysterious and often overlooked story of Edward the Martyr. He was a boy king, a symbol of royal piety, and a tragic figure whose murder would plunge England into political chaos and religious upheaval. Stick around as we explore the life, reign, and legacy of King Edward the Martyr, a name that still echoes through the stones of English cathedrals. Here starts our part 1. Who was Edward the Martyr? Edward the Martyr was born around 962 A.D., the eldest son of King Edgar the Peaceful, one of the most powerful and effective Anglo-Saxon kings. But Edward's path to the throne was not a smooth one. His mother, possibly named Æthelred, was not King Edgar's wife, making Edward's claim to the throne more contested than it might have otherwise been. King Edgar later married Queen Ælfthryth, and their son, Æthelred, was born a few years after Edward. This would set the stage for a dynastic rivalry that would ultimately cost Edward his life. Edward grew up in the royal court, likely receiving a religious education, as was customary for noble children of the time. But little did anyone know, this quiet and devout boy would soon be thrust into one of the most turbulent roles in English history. Now part 2 is the ascent to the throne. In 975 AD, King Edgar died suddenly, leaving behind the two rival sons, Edward and Æthelred. Edward was only about 13 or 14 years old, and his claim was supported by Dunstan, the powerful Archbishop of Canterbury, along with several influential nobles and clerics who favored the elder son's legitimacy, despite his mother's unofficial status. But Queen Ælfthryth had different plans. She campaigned for her son Æthelred, who was just a child at the time. The country split into two factions. The monastic reformers and clerics backed Edward, while secular lords and factions favoring Queen Ælfthryth rallied around Æthelred. Eventually, Edward was crowned king. Despite the tension, Edward attempted to rule, though his youth and the divided support made his position incredibly precarious. Part 3 is a short and troubled reign. Edward's reign lasted only about 3 years, from 975 to 978. It was marked by intense conflict over the reforms started by his father. King Edgar had begun a series of religious reforms that included expanding monastic life and removing married clergy. These were highly controversial, especially among landowners and nobles who saw the monasteries as political threats. Edward strongly supported these reforms, standing with Archbishop Dunstan and the church. This made him enemies among the aristocracy, who saw the boy king as a puppet of the clergy. Despite his youth, Edward showed a seriousness about royal duty. Chroniclers like Florence of Worcester and the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle describe him as pious and principled, but his reign was too short and too troubled for these qualities to bear fruit. Now here is our part 4, the murder at Corfe Castle. On March 18, 978 AD, tragedy struck. Edward was visiting his half-brother Æthelred at Corfe Castle in Dorset. As he dismounted his horse to greet the royal household, he was suddenly attacked and stabbed. According to several accounts, the attackers were members of Queen Ælfthryth's household. Edward tried to flee but collapsed from his wounds and died shortly afterward. His murder shocked the realm. While it was never formally proven, many believed Queen Ælfthryth orchestrated the killing to clear the path for her son to ascend the throne. Whether or not she was directly involved, her son Æthelred did become king soon after. The act was seen as a heinous crime against not only a young monarch, but also the sacred authority of kingship. The church responded by canonizing Edward as a martyr. His body was buried at Wareham, then later moved to Shaftesbury Abbey, where miracles were reportedly witnessed at his tomb.
Part 5. Legacy and Sainthood. He became a symbol of divine justice and martyrdom. His cult quickly grew, and he was recognized as a saint by the Anglo-Saxon Church. Pilgrims visited his shrine, and tales of healing and divine favor circulated. The story of Edward the Martyr became a powerful religious and political symbol, particularly for those who opposed the chaotic rule of his successor, Æthelred the Unready, whose reign saw repeated Viking invasions and internal strife. Centuries later, even after the Norman conquest, Edward's memory lingered. His remains were eventually hidden during the Reformation but rediscovered in the 20th century. Today, his relics are kept at a church in Surrey, where he's still venerated by some Orthodox Christians. Once of the Wees of the Remarks and Said, Part 6, is historical controversy and modern interest. Historians continue to debate the details of Edward's death. Was it truly an assassination ordered by Queen Ælfthryth? Or was it a spontaneous act by overzealous supporters of Æthelred? One thing is certain, Edward's death had long-lasting repercussions. It opened the door to one of the most disastrous reigns in English history and weakened the English monarchy at a time when Viking pressure was increasing. In recent years, there has been renewed interest in Edward the Martyr. Documentaries, church reconsecrations, and historical novels have all tried to peel back the layers of myth to understand the real boy king behind the martyrdom. Interesting facts rapid fire. 1. Edward was only about 14 to 15 years old when he died. He was buried 3 times, first at Wareham, then Shaftesbury Abbey, and finally in modern times at St. Edward III. 2. Some accounts suggest that miraculous healings occurred at his tomb. Queen Ælfthryth, long blamed for Edward's death, was the first crowned queen consort of England. 3. Edward's half-brother Æthelred became known as Æthelred the Unready due to his poor leadership, which makes Edward's brief reign look nobler in hindsight. His sainthood made him one of the last Anglo-Saxon kings to be canonized before the Norman conquest. Now, at the end, Edward the Martyr's life was short, his reign even shorter, but his story endures. A king crowned in division, killed in betrayal, and remembered in sainthood. In a time when thrones were shaky and loyalties dangerous, Edward's tale reminds us of how history often turns on the quiet tragedies of youth and innocence lost. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Anglo-Saxon England, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you never miss an episode of Echoes of the Past. Let us know in the comments who you'd like us to explore next. Until next time, keep seeking the echoes of history.